Hi everyone, it is Kimber, the study abroad specialist here. And in this week's video, we are going to be talking about how to choose a study abroad program specifically focused on locations. So when I first started my channel, I rolled out with, talking about my free e-guide that I wrote. If you're interested in getting that, please click into the link below and also go ahead and hit that subscribe button as we get started here. But I talked about that because that free e-guide of how to find your perfect study abroad program was really my way of sort of summarizing the key findings that I have found from all of my work of studying abroad myself, of working with students now for years on how they go about finding their study abroad programs and how we work together on doing that. And so I really try to focus on, kind of the key types of programs that are available out there. Again, not being super specific because there are so many different factors when it comes to thinking about study abroad programs. And I'm happy to dive deeper into that as we go along on this channel. But one of the things that I know that is key for students is location. And, as students are starting to look forward now to 2022, 2023, and, fingers crossed, thinking about, being able to study abroad again, I know that this is something that is, key for a lot of students. They may have had a location in mind of where they wanted to study abroad. Maybe now that has changed for a variety of reasons. But, it's just like anything else, location. It's so important. And particularly when you're thinking about study abroad, it is going to be a key factor into how you choose your program, or at least it should be, because it's going to impact so many different things. So the very first thing that I tend to have students think about when they're thinking about a location is, you want to think about what your particular interests are and what your goals are for your program. So yes, just like when you were choosing, a college or a uni or whatever you're doing right now, maybe you're just in high school, you probably had some goals and, some reasoning for doing that. So maybe you chose a school that you're going, maybe you're in a situation where you had to go to the school, maybe particularly if you're in high school and you just got routed to that school. But for the most part, I think that most of my people here are in college or university or grad school. So you made an active choice to decide what school you were going to. And it was likely up to your interests. So maybe you had a particular interest in communication studies and the school that you go to has great communication program. Maybe you were an art history major and, your program that you're doing is really great, really renowned for that. Maybe you're going into medicine and you decided that, wherever you study, maybe you're studying next to a world-renowned hospital. And so you have your eyes on an internship, whatever it is, you chose where you are studying right now for a reason. And it was likely based on your interest and then also kind of what your goals are for your future. And so you definitely need to think of study abroad as that sort of same thing. So study abroad is in a lot of ways, it's an extension of college, extension of university, extension of another educational route. And so you need to think of it that way. So, depending on what your interests are, depending on what you are passionate about, depending on what you plan to use your study abroad program for. In other videos, I've talked about that and how it's important to think of study abroad, again, as a tool, as a vehicle to move you forward in life and as another way to propel yourself into greatness. And so you really want to think through what your interests are. If you are someone who's not necessarily into, learning a foreign language, or, you don't want to deal with the barrier of that. Maybe you don't want to go to a country where that there might be a potential for a foreign language barrier. If you are someone who you're interested in, fashion, and you're interested in doing all these things, maybe studying abroad coming to the US in the Midwest of the country is not the best idea. It's great if you're interested in getting into farming, oil and gas, ranching, things like that, which I know a lot of international students actually are. So definitely come to the Midwest of the US if you're interested in that, but maybe high fashion is not the place. You need to maybe stick to New York or maybe go to Milan or wherever else. But you need to think about like what the actual interests are and what you're interested in. That should really help to, set your location. It shouldn't just be based on the fact that, I heard so many great things about London and I went there once, with my parents when I was 13, and that's why I want to go there. I could make any excuse to go to London because that's my happy place. But again, like, what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve and what are you looking for out of your program specific to the location? That should be one of the top priorities on your list of how the location that you're going to works with your study abroad goals and your actual interests so that you can have a great time. So for number 2, I think that in thinking about location, everyone has different preferences with location, just as they do with everything else. And so, I always just like to fall back on the old school model of country mouse and city mouse, because basically those are kind of like the two different sort of standard locations for study abroad. I could also say like water mouse too, because maybe you are doing a semester at sea, you really want to do that. But typically there's going to be students who flock to, studying in the bigger cities or the bigger metropolitan areas. And then there's students who are going to be doing off the beaten path. They may be going to smaller, more rural countries. They may be going to smaller, more rural, remote areas. And both of those have great benefits. It really is just going to depend what your interests are and what you're seeking out. And so I think that you yourself need to figure out what's going to be most important to you. I can tell you right now, just based on how I am, I would say that, a standard American suburb is about as country as I get. I don't know if you can probably tell or you've been able to tell, but I am much more of a city girl, much more kind of fast paced. And it's really interesting because my personalities a lot of time is much more laid back, but I like the fast pacedness of the city. There are times where I like to, go to a retreat somewhere that's a little bit more rural and sort of chill out. But I think that in terms of, kind of what works best for me, that I'm a city girl, kind of fast paced, like, all the busyness of it all. And so like the idea of me thinking about studying abroad back in the day in some place that was remote and sort of, like didn't have a lot of amenities and all of that, like that was not even on my radar because I would not consider it. But I do have a lot of respect for kids that do it. So back in that time, I had friends that, went to places like South Africa and, Nicaragua and just all these other places. And, since I've been working with students, advising them, there have been lots of students that have gone in different places, like remote places in Asia and, different parts of Africa and things like that. So I think that it really does come down to sort of tying into your interests and your goals. Like, where are you going to feel most comfortable? Like, where do you think that you're going to feel most comfortable? Because again, like both aspects of that have both positives and negatives. So for example, I tend to use this example a lot, but, sort of looking at, for example, Europe versus the US. So if you are a student who you're going to study in Europe, like city life is great because you can just kind of jump around from different place. You're on the Euro, let's say you're in London, you're on the Eurostar, and in an hour and a half, you're over in Paris. And then, you can just go over to this part of France, so you're over in Italy and you're doing this and that, and all over the place. There are certain parts here, let's say you're a UK student or a student from Europe coming here to the US. There are certain cities like, we'll have to see how it all shakes out after what has happened in this past 18 months. But typically, you think of places like New York, you think of a little bit of LA. But I think that what a lot of students don't understand when they're coming to the US is that, for better or for worse, like the US is not really built to, the US is built to be explored in a different way than, let's say, most of Europe, right? So, in terms of like, let's say you're someone who, you don't drive a car, or, you're used to walking everywhere, or you're not used to taking public transportation that, is not like as readily available, or, you're used to being able to get from city to city really quickly. In some instances, you can do that, but it's really going to depend on where you're living. You could be living, in a huge place like Texas or in California where, the next city may not be, that close. It could be, lots of kilometers away from you. I can't tell you how many, depending on where you're going, but, it may be 30 minutes away from you, like the next city where you need to go. And you may or may not, let's say you need a car to get there. Maybe you don't know how to drive. Maybe you don't feel comfortable driving. If you take a taxi or an Uber, it could be quite pricey. And you probably can't walk there depending on where you are, because it's going to be filled with highways and underpasses and all these things that you can't actually pass. So that is, I know just in general, like when even interacting with tourists, when they come to the United States, they're like, this is not what I thought, because again, on TV, and I know that you shouldn't get what you get from TV, but all of us do it, right? It's like on TV and most of the movies and shows that they see like New York, and so everyone's just busy and running down the subway and running down the street and all of that. But then like if they, just take it down a notch and they go over to New Jersey, or, they start traveling down the coast and they get to, South Carolina or Georgia or Florida or Texas, or they even come over to California, it's like, yeah, I can't actually walk where I want to go. So it's a different vibe, right? And you're just gonna have to understand what that means for where you're going. But I think that it's something that you need to think about wherever you're interested in going. What does that mean for you? So does it mean that, maybe where you're going to study, like it's all remote, so it's all like rural, but everything is just all there together, and you get to do a lot of like mission trips, you get to be out in nature, you get to do all these different things? Or are you going to be in a city where you're going to be responsible for a lot of your sort of daily amenities? What does that mean for you? Are you going someplace that has earthquakes? Are you going to some place that has a lot of flooding, a lot of rain, whatever that means? Those are like the little things that people often don't think about until they get to a place. And it's my job, my responsibility. I feel I'm taking it on to help people navigate that before they get there, so that you're not stuck in a bad situation and you have figured that out well before you even get on the plane. So for the last tip on thinking about location and how that will help you choose a study abroad program, you definitely want to think about, the dollars and the cents, as we say here in the US. You want to think about the money and the budget, because that is going to be key for pretty much everything. I mean, money rules the world in a lot of ways, unfortunately. And it often determines how much a program is, kind of related to the last point. If you're going to a program in a big city, particularly a big, kind of popular destination like London, those prices for those programs are often overinflated because it's something that everybody wants. Whereas if you're going to a program, or lots of people want, if you're going to a program in, Peru or something like that, I want to hear about that. I'm sure that it's lovely, but there's going to be like, often the prices are a little bit lower in overall value, because again, it's sort of off the beaten path. And so there is definitely, importance in thinking about that, because you also have to figure in, what are you getting for your price? So are you getting, with the price that you're paying, are you getting, full access to housing? Are you getting a visa included? Because again, like depending on what location you're going to, visas can be really expensive. So you definitely want to think about that as well. What is included in what you're actually going to be paying for in reference to location? It's going to be key, because there's all these different factors that kind of come into it. In terms of location for your healthcare, you're going to have to pay for that. Is the program that you're on going to pay for that? Are you going to a place with free healthcare? But then how does that work for people that are going to be studying for a short amount of time? Or if you're going to be studying for a long period of time, are you responsible for any kind of taxes on that? There are so many different factors. And I think as you're thinking about your budget and the price of what you're willing to pay, able to pay in terms of the location, it is key to think about those numbers and how that's going to impact you well before you even, start filling out your application. Again, like keeping in mind that it could all change. We know that right now we're in the middle of this global thing, right? And so inflation is happening. And so there's inflation hitting a lot of different touch points. And so that's just going to be a part of life, definitely for the next couple years. But if you're able to plan that out and say, even with inflation, like I can still, afford to go to London, still afford to be able to study in Italy, or I need to maybe consider some places that would still be, kind of on my second tier list, but that I could definitely be happy with. I think that that's going to be really impactful for you before you get too deep and too committed to one program, to understanding, what in terms of location and in budget, how those two match up to make for a great semester away. And so I hope this video has been helpful for you. As I was saying in the opening, I know that as we're heading into fall now, people are starting to at least think forward to study abroad with, high hopes that people can get back into it, even more in 2022 and 2023. And so as you're going through picking out your programs, I definitely wanted you to sort of think about specifically for location, how that might impact some of the things within your life, because it's important and it matters. And so if you haven't already, go ahead and click the like button on this video. Please share this video. If you are a study abroad student, I always say you probably have other people in your network who are also interested in study abroad. So share this video with them. I really appreciate it. And please click the subscribe button. I release videos every Friday, and I will see you on the next one.